We'd like to get our session started, and we'd like to introduce to you Mr. McQueen. If you'll put your hands together for him, give him a big round of applause.
Well, good morning. I feel a little bit like I'm in church with everyone sitting on the back row. I want to thank the Osage Mineral Council Chairman Waller for the invitation to be here to speak today. And also appreciate all the steering committee members who worked hard to make this event possible. And also my thanks to Principal Chief Jeffrey Standingberg. The nation has continued to make such great strides throughout the years, and this beautiful facility they have here is a prime example of that. I've enjoyed my time back here. You know, I've called Tulsa my home base for the last 40 or 45 years, even though I've moved around the country some. And obviously, being in Tulsa, I've gotten very well acquainted with a lot of places in Osage County. In fact, my collegiate house mother called Hominy home. I had a fraternity brother from Fairfax area, friends in Pulaski and Skytook as well, so I feel a little bit like I'm back on my home turf. Well, I've been at EPA about 3 months. I started August 5th. Before that, I was the Cabinet Secretary for Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources in New Mexico. And before that, I spent about 35 years in the oil and gas industry, working most recently for WPX Energy as the Vice President for the San Juan region in New Mexico. That's my New Mexico contact. So I'm a petroleum engineer by training, University of Tulsa graduate. And so when we talk about oil and gas, I feel like at least that's a place in EPA that I have a very good understanding and background. Since I got to Region 6 in Dallas, I often get the question of what your priorities are for your tenure in service. And of course, I'm a political appointee, so my tenure is very much based on the outcome of the next election. So keeping that in mind, I've adopted 6 goals that I think are achievable within the tenure that gets us through 2021. And I want to talk about those goals briefly today, because some of them impact what's going on here in the Osage Nation. My first goal is to provide certainty for the regulated community. Second, to streamline our permitting processes. Third, to listen to all our stakeholders, both states and tribes. I want to consider alternative uses of our produced water in the oil and gas industry. We want to strengthen our state and tribal engagement and partnerships. And we want to work on NIFTY's delegation for the 3 states in Region 6 that don't currently have that, Texas, Oklahoma, and New Mexico. Well, as your Region 6 administrator, I want to continue to work to provide certainty and consistency to the regulated community. Regulations, permits, compliance assurance activities should have clear, creative incentives for achieving better outcomes and focus on the intended outcomes. Regulators should strive for consistency with respect to regulatory policy and permit interpretation while providing timely information to the stakeholders requesting the interpretation. In Region 6, we have a strategic plan that we are working through, and one of the goals that we have for Region 6 is to reach permitted, regulated decision within 6 months. And we're working on process improvements to get us to that point by September 30th, 2022. And 2022 sounds like a long time away, but when you really do the math, that's less than 3 years. In EPA time, that's kind of a blink of the eye.
California.
That does not mean that we'll be approving every permit within the 6-month period, but simply that we want to give an indication about the decision point within the 6 months so business can make their decisions and move ahead. We are very focused on reaching out to all of our stakeholders, which includes tribal nation states, local communities, and industry. We have 5 states in Region 6. We also have 66 Indian tribes in Region 6, including 38 here in Oklahoma. You know, after working for both industry and the state of New Mexico, I know how important it is to balance the concerns and interests of all stakeholders in making sound policy choices to protect the environment and promote economic growth. I've been on the road meeting with a number of stakeholders like you all at least once a week, sometimes twice, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here in the Osage Nation today and hear your concerns. Just last week we were at the State Review of Oil and Natural Gas Environment Regulators. You may know that as Stronger, that convened a roundtable discussion in Albuquerque where state agencies, industry members, and environmental groups, trade groups, academics, and the tribes were invited to discuss oil and gas related matters. I participated at the roundtable and it was a great opportunity to hear from all of our stakeholders. Additionally, a couple of weeks ago, Administrator Wheeler signed a memorandum of understanding with the governor of North Dakota to renew EPA's relationship with the Interstate Oil and Gas Compact Commission. You'll probably know that Governor Bertram in North Dakota is this year's chairman of the IOGCC. While I served with the governor for 3 years in New Mexico, produced water became a topic of a lot of discussion. And the reason for that is if you look at Region 6 today, we are producing almost 70% of the crude oil from the United States. 50% of the crude oil being produced is from the Permian Basin in New Mexico and Texas. Today, the Permian Basin, if you look at New Mexico and Texas combined, is producing north of 5 million barrels of crude oil a day. That's just an incredible number to think about with what horizontal drilling and hydraulic stimulation has done for us. Because even 15 years ago, we pretty much thought the Permian Basin was done. But now that we're producing all that oil, we're also producing a lot of waste products with the oil. In fact, in New Mexico today, we produce about 5 barrels of produced water for every barrel of oil that's produced. So that's 5 million barrels of produced water in the Permian Basin. And when I worked for New Mexico, my concern for the oil and gas industry was we really did not have a good alternative method to dispose of produced water other than UIC injection or downhole injection. And I became very concerned about that because of what we saw happening in Oklahoma with induced seismicity of wastewater disposal. So EPA started an initiative to look for alternative uses of produced water. And New Mexico very much got on board with that, and Oklahoma is on board with that as well. And EPA issued their draft study earlier this year and took public comment on that through July 1st this past summer, and is now reviewing all of the public comments. And I'm hoping for the report to be out by the end of the year. Will open the door for us to consider new and alternative ways of utilizing our produced water rather than subsurface injection. I'm also very committed to maintaining and strengthening our state and tribal partnerships. Regardless of delegation and primacy, the most important part of cooperative federalism is cooperation. Federal and state regulators should work to establish meaningful relationships to ensure timely and effective outcomes. During my time as Cabinet Secretary for the state of New Mexico, I worked hard to streamline regulations when possible and cooperate with EPA, so I know how important it is for state and federal processes to work together to come up with mutually beneficial outcomes. To that end, Region 6 has been engaging with and listening to our many stakeholders. Recently, my deputy administrator held an outreach effort that was going on during our regional reorganization and visited with each state environmental quality department, along with my chief of staff, Aaron Chancellor. And my predecessor, Ann Itzel, who is now in D.C. as the AA of Air and Radiation, committed to visiting all of our 66 federal tribes. And while she was in Region 6, she got through about half of those. So I have about 33 tribes to visit in the next 2 years or so. And I look forward to that. We always try to give our state partners primacy in environmental programs, so we're looking forward to working with our states that do not have their NICPE's delegation for oil and gas-related wastewater discharges. As I mentioned earlier, that's Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Texas. On December 20th of last year, Oklahoma submitted a request for modification to the Oklahoma Pollution Discharge Elimination System program to add produced water discharges, which was under the jurisdiction of the Oklahoma Corporation Commission. Earlier this month, Oklahoma submitted a supplemental to that request, expanding the covered discharges to all oil and gas water discharges, which we are currently reviewing. We'll continue to work with all of our state partners to ensure the delegation process is smooth. In addition to my 6 short-term goals, Administrator Wheeler has some strategic goals, and I'd like to briefly cover those. These evolved out of the 2018 to 2022 strategic plan, which was aimed at having a cleaner, healthier environment, cultivating more effective partnerships, and providing certainty and bolstering compliance. Under the first goal of the agency's strategic plan, we are dedicated to delivering a cleaner, safer, and healthier environment for all Americans and future generations by carrying out the agency's core mission. One of those core missions is education, and this week we are celebrating America Recycles Week. In fact, this is the first time in our history, our 50-year history, that we're celebrating a week of recycling activities. Historically, it's been just one day recognizing our recycling efforts, but this is one of the administrator's priorities. Here's some interesting statistics. In 1970, household recycling was in its infancy, and our recycling rate was only about 10%. Today, recycling programs can be found across the country, and the national recycling rate is over 35%. Recycling is one of the most widely available ways for each and every one of us to have a positive impact on the environment. Recycling conserves energy and natural resources and is a vital part of our economy. Recycling just 1 ton of aluminum cans saves the equivalent of 21 barrels of oil that can be put to other productive uses. While recycling in the U.S. remains strong, the system is facing some significant challenges, such as recycling correctly and also outdated infrastructure. EPA has been holding discussions across the country to identify market weaknesses and opportunities. And with our partners, we are assembling a toolkit to spur future market development. During our next year, EPA region will play a vital role as the American Recycles work continues to expand across the country. Another significant rule change for us this year has been the lead and copper rule. And this is just another example of how we're working to protect human health. The U.S. has made tremendous progress in lowering children's blood lead levels, including the reduction of exposure to lead in drinking water. Through strengthened laws and regulations, the median lead level for young children increased by 95% from 1976 to 2013. However, some children in communities are still being exposed to elevated levels of lead in their water. Through the Federal Action Plan to Reduce Childhood Lead Exposure, we are addressing lead on multiple fronts, including making some very important updates to the lead and copper rule, which has been not substantially updated since 1991. Our proposed updates to the lead and copper rule ensure water utilities will promptly act to protect the most at-risk communities first. EPA's proposal does not change the lead and copper rule's existing level of 15 parts per billion but it requires more actions at that level. Additionally, EPA is proposing for the first time a new lead trigger level of 10 parts per billion, a flexible provision designed to compel water systems to take proactive, tailored actions to upgrade aging infrastructure and reduce lead levels in drinking water. The Administrator's Goal 2 of the EPA strategic plan is to provide certainty to states, localities, tribal nations, and the regulated community in carrying out shared responsibilities and communicating results to all Americans. I would like to talk a little bit about opportunity zones, which are economically distressed areas that can be designated for preferential tax treatment under the President's new tax law. There are over 100 designated opportunity zones in Oklahoma, 19 here in the Tulsa area. This tax law allows for tax incentives for long-term private sector investment in these economically distressed areas. As part of the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council, EPA is working with our federal partners to identify ways we can better target, streamline, and coordinate federal programs at the local level. Opportunity zones can help EPA meet our mission. By being involved, we can help communities avoid unintended consequences and create jobs and opportunities where they are needed most. Under Goal 3 of the agency's strategic plan, we are striving to increase certainty, compliance, and effectiveness by applying the rule of law to achieve more efficient and effective agency operations, service delivery, and regulatory relief. We're working with businesses to ensure compliance while engaging states and tribes to help develop their compliance initiatives. We are focusing on compliance to trim down the time between the identification of violation and correcting that violation. At EPA, we want to utilize a full range of compliance assurance tools available to us to guarantee timely compliance. That toolkit still includes formal enforcement, but also compliance assistance, informal enforcement, and self-audits. We've made a great deal of progress, and a lot of the credit should go to you and all that you and your companies have done to ensure compliance. Finally, we are focused on reducing the state implementation program backlog, or better known as SIPs. Every region has a backlog of SIPs older than 18 months needing action. Region 6 has a goal of eliminating the SIP backlog by 2020 and acting on new SIPs within the Clean Air Act timeframes. Arkansas is the first state in Region 6 to have cleared their SIP backlog, so we're looking forward to getting that done in the near future. And I'm sure that you've all heard about the NSPS Quad OA rule amendments we recently proposed. EPA expects to finalize both the technical revisions, which were proposed in September of last year, and the policy revisions, which were just proposed last month, to new source performance standards, NSPS, for the oil and gas industry, commonly referred to as the Quad OA. These revisions will continue requiring operators to control emissions from new and modified oil and gas emission sources while reducing the regulatory burden. Last month, EPA held an all-day hearing in Dallas to take public comment on the proposed policy amendments that will remove regulatory duplication and save the industry millions of dollars in compliance costs each year, while maintaining health and environmental protection from oil and gas sources and the agency considers appropriate to regulate. This proposal is in response to President Trump's executive order on promoting energy independence and economic growth, which directs agencies to review existing regulations that potentially burden the development of or the use of domestically produced energy sources, including oil and natural gas, and to rescind or suspend regulatory requirements if appropriate. proposed amendments remove all sources in the transmission and storage segment of the oil and natural gas industry from regulation under the NSPS, both for ozone-forming volatile organic compounds and for greenhouse gases. The existing NSPS regulates greenhouse gases through limitations on emissions of methane. The amendments would also rescind the methane requirements in the 2016 NSPS that apply to sources of production and processing segments of the industry. As an alternative, EPA is proposing to rescind the methane requirements that apply to all sources in the oil and gas natural industry without removing any sources from the current source category. EPA's regulatory impact analysis estimates that these proposed amendments would save the oil and gas and natural industry somewhere between 17 and 19 million a year, or for a total of somewhere between 97 and 123 million from 2019 through 2025. This proposal is separate from EPA's September 2018 proposal to make targeted improvements in the 2016 NSPS, including amendments to fugitive emissions, leaks, monitoring requirements, and rules. And in April of this year, EPA made a determination that revisions to federal regulations for the management of oil and gas exploration and production waste under Subtitle D of the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, better known as RCRA, are not necessary. We will continue to review the state solid waste program and engage with stakeholders on the next regulatory review, which is in 3 years. Well, again, it's been my honor to be with you today. It's always good to be back in Oklahoma, and especially the Tulsa community. I'd be happy to attempt to answer any of the questions, and you have those. My highly qualified Chief of Staff, Erin Chancellor, is here with me today, so she'll have the answer if we need to get them in the weeds. Any questions?
So you said that you had an all-day conference in Dallas recently?
It was an all-day public hearing
And
for
what,
the changes in what OA. So anytime EPA has a proposed rule change, part of our process is an opportunity for public comment. And so we held that in Dallas. And in addition to public comment, there's an opportunity for folks to submit written comments for a period after that. And I think that has closed at this point. So now those public comments are being evaluated. Yes?
I apologize, I had to have a little minor emergency, but I was sent an email from someone that was telling me that there's a new rule change, and I'm not sure who's going to be regulating it, but we're going to have to map every flow line and every pipeline in our world. Do you know anything about that?
I know that that would be the state jurisdiction.
They have no jurisdiction here. No, it's across the United States. The guys in Canada or in Colorado that sent it to me. It's across the United States, and it's going to be every flow line. Because I asked him specifically, I said, you mean from every well I've got to every tank battery? And he said, yes. It will have to be mapped. It goes into effect July the 1st.
I don't think that's EPA, so that's
Good job.
Transportation.
They say it was EPA.
I can't remember, but it was a concern because with us, that's going to be astronomical. I mean, most of us don't even know where all of our flow lines are. And probably don't have a way to find them if they're poly and they're buried. Unless you just go find them out in the dirt. I'll try to pull up his email in a second to see if I can find where it was. But it goes into effect, it's already been in the Federal Register, and it goes into effect July the 1st.
At the very least, let's exchange info.
That would be great. Thank you.
Yes. In your program, you mentioned 35% recycling, and in that you mentioned, I think, one aluminum can, I'm not for sure, that equaled 21 barrels it saved.
Not one can.
Of oil, yeah, I maybe misheard, that's why I was asking. That seemed like a lot.
1 ton.
1 ton of cans. There you go.
That's a lot of cans.
So to recycle 1 ton of aluminum saves 21 barrels of oil that it would have to make that 1 ton of new aluminum.
Correct.
That's the correlation.
Yes.
Can you expand upon the tax advantage areas that you were describing in and around Tulsa?
The opportunity zones?
Yeah. How does it work? Lay it all out.
It's pretty straightforward, actually. There's tax rebates or tax incentives for developing within those designated areas. So,
Building an office, building a yard, anything's open.
and one of the reasons EPA is interested in that is we have a lot of brownfield sites which were either contaminated sites or sites that have been cleaned up. And a lot of those brownfield sites are within these incentive zones. So that's why we're trying to get the word out that these exist and that there's.
How do you, is there like a registry or a map of said zones somewhere?
There is a map. And the state, the governor primarily recommended the borders of those. So,
Yeah, you can actually just Google, if you Google Tulsa Opportunity Zones, you should be able to find it. It's surprisingly easy. Originally we were confused on how to find it.
You're pulling my leg.
Well, it's not our website, so it's
Somebody else's.
yeah, it's typically, it's on both the IRS website, usually the city's website and the state. Yeah.
I think Huston is one.
Is
The enterprise.
Parts around Costco.
Huh?
Parts around Costco.
Yeah, because we were discussing at the Osage County Industrial Authority, and they were talking about how they were implementing opportunity zone and enterprise zone stuff.
I found the boundaries to be a little bizarre for a left where they don't necessarily follow lines that you would normally think. Anything else? Again, thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Let's have a big round of applause for him.